Chapter 11. They all put their protective gear back on, but before heading back into the woods, Mike figured out the GPS coordinates of their destination and entered them into his phone. Since there was no road to take to their destination, the map software was confused, so Mike turned off the volume and focused on the map. Mike again carried his tranquilizer pistol in his pocket and scanned the forest carefully as they trudged through the woods. They eventually reached the area with few trees, and Beth said, "I remember seeing this earlier today, but we passed in a different spot." "Yes, we were a bit south of here." "Why are there no tall trees along this narrow strip?" "That's interesting," Dr. Blake said. "I saw this too, but just considered it a fluke of nature. I hadn't noticed how straight and how far it went. Did something kill the trees years ago?" "Lumberjacks, I imagine," Mike said. "I heard a road ran through here a long time ago. It was probably put here before this place became a national park. That would have been 90 years ago or more." He pointed to a small white patch. "Look, you can still see small patches of gravel." "I'm surprised Mother Nature hasn't completely covered it over," Beth said. "Mother Nature never fails to surprise me," Mike said. "She is almost as good at tearing things down as she is at building them up." He looked at the map on his phone and said, "We are getting close. We just need to follow this old road north for a few hundred feet." They continued down the old road until they reached the end. The tall trees resumed in front of them. Mike looked at the map on his phone and said, "We're here." They all looked around, and Dr. Blake said, "Everything looks normal. I don't know what we are looking for." Beth said, "Don't you find it a bit strange that this 90-year-old road ends exactly where we predicted the source of our problems would be?" "Do you think this old road is related to our new problem?" Mike asked. "I don't know," Beth said. "It could be related, but I have no idea how." "I think I might know," Dr. Blake said. "When that meteorite hit, it created a strong tremor that some people mistook for an earthquake. What if someone used this road to dispose of chemicals? They might have buried them underground around here. Maybe that waste was in barrels that burst open when the tremor hit." "That makes a lot of sense," Beth said. "Do you have any idea where we should look?" "I have an idea," Mike said. "If the road stopped here, then this is where they must have buried the chemicals if that is what they were doing. They wouldn't bury anything under the road, but it probably wouldn't be more than 100 feet or so from the road. So I would guess we will find what we are looking for within a 100-foot radius from where we are standing." He looked around and said, "The woods are less dense to the east. Let's look that way first." They spread out with Beth to the right and Dr. Blake to the left. A large oak tree stood in front of Mike. A large branch from the tree lay on the ground to the left. When Mike got close, he said, "Look at this. This branch fell off recently." They met up by the tree. Dr. Blake said, "The tremor from the meteorite must have caused it to break loose." Mike looked around. About 100 feet beyond the tree was a small stream, but he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Beth made her way to the other side of the fallen branch and said, "You're not going to believe this." Mike and Dr. Blake rushed over to where Beth was standing and looked down in surprise at what they saw. Prosody, a pair of doors lay on the ground next to the fallen branch, like the entrance to a storm cellar, but in the middle of nowhere. "What the hell?" Mike said. "Exactly," Beth said. "I think we will find what we are looking for down there." The metal doors were rusty with several small holes in them. One hole was big enough to put a fist through. A padlock held the two doors together, but it was quite rusty too. Mike grabbed one of the handles and pulled hard, but the handle broke instead of the lock. He tried again with the other handle, but instead of one strong pull, he rattled the door up and down until the hinge holding the padlock snapped off. Mike pulled both doors open, and they all looked inside. They could see stairs leading down into a dark room. They all took out their phones and turned on the flashlights. "Wait here. I'll check it out," Mike said and started down the stairs. "Wait here, my ass," Beth said, and followed him down the stairs with Dr. Blake close behind. The bottom of the stairway opened to what looked like a crude office. There was a metal desk to the left with a black and white photograph of Herbert Hoover hanging behind it on the wall. To the right stood several file cabinets lined up along the wall. On the opposite wall, past the file cabinets, was a door. On top of the desk sat two metal trays, which Mike assumed were an inbox and an outbox. One of the boxes still contained papers. Mike picked up the top paper. It was very yellow and dusty, but still readable. "This is dated March 10th, 1933, Mike said. "It's from the office of the President of the United States ordering this place to be closed down." He thought about it and said, "That was right after Roosevelt took office." "So this must have been some kind of government facility," Beth said. "What the hell were they doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" Dr. Blake, who had been thumbing through one of the file cabinets, spoke up. "Research. This entire file cabinet contains information about something called Batch 9. "Batch 9? So they were developing some kind of chemical?" Beth asked. "It would seem so," Dr. Blake said as she read one of the files. "It will take weeks to go through all these documents, but from what I have seen so far, it looks like they were developing chemical weapons." "I thought they outlawed chemical weapons after the First World War," Mike said. "Not until 1925, Dr. Blake said. "Some of these files date back to 1922. If I keep looking, I might find some earlier than that." "Why wasn't this place closed in 1925 then?" Mike asked. "Really, Mike? You need to ask that," Beth asked. "What was I thinking?" "I think we need to see what's behind door number 1, Beth said. "Agreed," Mike said before opening the door. They all pointed their lights into the room before going inside. Straight ahead and to the left were two large tables, perhaps 12 feet long and 5 feet wide. Each table contained dozens of glass beakers and hoses, along with various other scientific components. A microscope stood on the end of each of the tables. At the far left was a large sink. Next to the sink were wooden shelves with various pieces of scientific equipment. The back wall contained dozens of empty cages. To the right, along the wall, were several shelving units, all holding various sized glass containers. The two bottom shelves near the door had collapsed, and all the bottles were broken. The floor was wet with a thick, milky liquid. Some of it had seeped under the door. "Watch where you step," Mike said. "You don't want to get that stuff on your shoes." They all entered the room, stepping over the liquid. They shone their lights on the broken bottles and the shelves above them. "These are all labeled Batch 9, Dr. Blake said. "We need to learn what this stuff is." They all stepped over the liquid and went back into the office. Dr. Blake pulled a handful of files and handed them to Beth. She gave another stack to Mike. "We need to look through these and figure out what the hell Batch 9 is." Beth set her papers on the desk and sat in the chair. She held the light in her left hand while flipping through the papers with her right. Mike placed his files on the other side of the desk and looked through them while Dr. Blake stood at the file cabinet, looking through documents. "Here's a paper dated September 3rd, 1932, Mike said. It reads, "Preliminary testing indicates that Batch 9 has fallen short of expectations, especially in the non-lethal requirement. So far, 7 out of 10 test rats have died after first becoming extremely aggressive. It looks like they were trying to develop a non-lethal weapon." "They obviously failed," Beth said. "I have a report here that is dated September 29th, 1932. It says, the formula, Batch 9, was administered to 5 monkeys at 50% toxicity. All 5 exhibited aggressive behavior, followed by the death of 4 of the 5 monkeys. That makes it seem even more toxic at a lower dose," Mike said. "It's hard to make a judgment from just 2 tests," Dr. Blake said. "We don't know how healthy the animals were to begin with. It could also be that rats are more resilient to that chemical than monkeys are. So anyway, what has been happening around here is very clear. The tremor or the falling tree branch caused those shelves to collapse, spilling a dangerous chemical on the floor. Batch 9 starts in liquid form, but it is designed to be used as a gas. As it evaporates, a hazardous chemical enters the air and seeps out through the gaps in the door. Any person or animal who walked by this area would be affected." Dr. Blake pulled out another paper and read it. She said, "This is dated December 18th, 1932. It basically says that Batch 9 had the opposite effect as intended. Instead of making the subjects fearful so they would retreat, it made them aggressive so they would attack. I can see why that would not be very helpful in a war. Why would they just leave all this stuff here? Mike asked. It seems very irresponsible. It sure does, Dr. Blake said. If I were to guess, I would say cleaning it up was a low priority to them at the time. I'm sure they planned to send a cleanup crew, but the paperwork probably got lost, and this place was essentially forgotten. So, what's the next step? Mike asked. The next step is to get a cleanup crew out here as soon as possible. Considering the delicate nature of moving this stuff, it will probably take weeks to remove everything, but I think once we block off this area and clean the spill, we can reopen this section of the park. 2 days maybe, 3 tops. That's good news. It will be nice to get back to normal, Mike said. He noticed Beth had a somewhat disappointed look on her face and added, although I will miss having a partner. Beth smiled and said, you won't know what to do without me. You may be right about that. Right now, we should get out of here so we can report our findings. Mike led the way up the stairs. When they were all standing on the ground outside, Mike closed one door and Beth closed the other. Mike stood looking at the door for a moment and asked, is there anything we can cover this door with to keep the gas from escaping? There's plastic in one of the vans, but nothing here, Dr. Blake said. Beth turned to see what might be in nature that they could use and saw something that made her scream. Mike turned and saw a large black bear 10 yards away and moving towards them. He pulled Beth backward and stepped in front of her. The bear stopped 5 feet away, stood tall on its hind legs, and growled. Mike, seeing an opportunity, pulled out his tranquilizer gun and fired point blank into the bear's chest. It dropped to all fours and growled even louder. Mike turned to the 2 women and yelled, "Run!" He turned back to face the bear as it knocked him off his feet. The bear was on top of him as it swung at Mike's face with its powerful claws. His mask flew off, and the bear let out a massive growl into his face. He could smell the bear's breath and knew this was the end for him. He only hoped he distracted the bear long enough for Beth and Dr. Blake to escape. Just then, a stick hit the bear on its head. Mike couldn't see where the stick came from, but noticed that the bear's attention had turned away. The stick hit the bear again. Mike turned his head and saw Beth beating the bear with a tree branch. "Beth, get out of here!" Mike yelled, but she kept hitting the bear until it started chasing her. Beth threw the branch at the bear, took out her gun, and ran. The bear chased her quickly at first, but its speed gradually diminished until it could no longer run or even walk, for that matter. Beth stopped and turned. She pointed the gun at the bear as it lay on the ground and fell asleep. She stood there, watching it breathe for several seconds, then put her gun away and raced back to Mike. Dr. Blake was already at his side, helping him to his feet. When Beth got close, she said, "Help me. We have to get him away from here quickly. Hopefully, it's not too late." Beth picked up the dart gun and put it in her pocket. She got on the other side of Mike and put his arm around her shoulders. His chest and arms were bloody, but his face mask protected his face from the bear's claws. "I should probably tell you that as much as I like 2 lovely ladies paying attention to me simultaneously, I can walk just fine," Mike said. "Okay, tough guy, let's see what you got," Beth said. Mike started walking, and Beth and Dr. Blake followed. He picked up his pace, and the 2 women raced to keep up with him. "Slow down," Dr. Blake yelled. "You need to keep your heart rate down." Mike stopped and turned around. He felt his chest. "Oh my God, I inhaled that stuff. My heart is racing. Shit, I don't want to die out here. We need to get back before it's too late." Mike turned around and started running, but a dart hit him on the back of his right shoulder. He stopped and reached around with his left hand and removed it. He looked back and saw Beth holding the tranquilizer gun. "You shot me. Why?" Beth caught up to him, put her arm around him, and said, "Because I've grown attached to you, and I don't want you to die." Dr. Blake got on the other side of Mike, and the 2 helped him walk. They made it halfway back to the trail when Mike became too tired to continue. They set him down, and Beth used his radio and reported that a bear had attacked Mike, and they were bringing him in. She said he was exposed to the toxin and needed the paramedics to meet them on the trail. They picked him up again and struggled to carry him through the woods. 2 paramedics and several rangers were waiting on the trail. As soon as they saw them, they quickly made their way through the woods and carried Mike the rest of the way. Once they were on the trail, they put him on a stretcher and carried him to the waiting ambulance. Beth got in the back of the ambulance with Mike, and they left for the hospital. He was exposed to the chemical. Beth said to the paramedic, "Yes, we were briefed on that," he said. "I just don't understand why his heart rate is normal, even a little below normal. We were expecting him to be on the verge of a heart attack." "I shot him with a tranquilizer dart," Beth said. The paramedic looked surprised and said, "That was smart thinking. You probably saved his life." Falling Star continues on the next video. For more information on this book and others by this author, please visit charleshuss.com.